Hi, everybody. We're just letting people find their way in from the waiting room. Okay, so welcome to this Festival of Trusteeship session. It's lovely to see you all here this morning. Today, we're talking about lived experience on boards. Before I pass over to Robbie Crowe, who's chairing our panel, a few bits of housekeeping. So you will have seen that the session is being recorded. If you're coming in on a single ticket, i.e. you've booked this event separately, you will get the recording sent to you today. If you're a weekly pass holder, you'll get all of the recordings at the end of the week. You've been muted as you've come into the call. Please stay muted. That keeps the airwaves nice and clear for everybody. Closed captions have been enabled at our end. So if you want the subtitles, please click your CC or closed caption button on your device. Please feel free to use the chat to ask questions, to share reflections. Please keep your comments respectful. And please note that we'll always repeat a question that's in the chat before the panel answers it. Equally, if the chat gets very busy and you're finding it distracting, please feel absolutely free to completely ignore it. It does come through on the recording if you'd prefer to catch up with it later. We're holding our final networking session tonight. So if you hear some things today that you would really love to talk about with other trustees, please feel free to come to our networking session. That's at 7:30 tonight till 8:15. I'll post a link to that in the chat. And if you're a weekly pass holder, that will have been on your morning email with all of your links this morning. Thank you to our media partner, Third Sector, for helping us shout about the festival and getting so many people along. And a giant thank you to our sponsors, Ecclesiastical. It's thanks to them that events are maximum of £5 to attend, and the whole Aspiring Trustee strand is completely free. So on that note, I'm going to ask Faith from Ecclesiastical to say a few words.
Thanks very much, Penny, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Faith Kitchen. I'm representing Ecclesiastical Insurance today, and we are absolutely honoured to be sponsoring the festival again this year. We're an award-winning specialist insurer and risk management partner for charities. We're very committed to the sector and have been working with the sector for over 135 years now. And we support the sector not only with our specialist knowledge and expertise, but also with our knowledge of the sector through research. I know some of the sessions this week, we've been using our latest trustee research within the sessions as well. But we've also just launched our charity risk barometer report that includes all of our latest research on the sector. It can be found on our website, but it was also published by Third Sector last week as well. What you may not be aware, though, is that Ecclesiastical Insurance is part of the Benefat Group. And this is a group of specialist financial services companies with a shared ambition to give all of our profits back to good causes, so charities, essentially. So we're now the third corporate donor in the UK and have aspirations to reach number 1. The reason I'm telling you this is because we also run a programme of giving each year. I know Penny will pop the link to this in the chat in a moment. It's called the Movement for Good Awards from the Benefat Group, and anyone can nominate a registered charity or not-for-profit or KIC in the UK, etc., Republic of Ireland, for a grant of £1,000 at any point in the time in the year. But actually this week, only this week, we have a £5,000 grant draw for any charities involved with young people or children. So if that is you, or you have an interest in a charity for children and young people, please do apply. It takes about 30 seconds. So we very much hope you enjoy the Festival of Trusteeship and today's session. Thanks ever so much, Penny.
Thank you very much, Faith. And straight over to Robbie Crowe, who's chairing the session.
Hi there, everyone, and thank you, Penny, for that great introduction. Welcome, everyone, along today to a session which I'm hoping will be interesting and hopefully give you some practical tips as well. I won't go over the description full, but I think the headline is worth mentioning, and that is 59% of charities report that the boards do not reflect the communities that they serve. In a time when lived experience and what people actually feel is at the height of our thinking, it's really important that charities do address this issue and look at whether or not lived experience is something that we feel needs to be involved. At the end of the day, charities are mostly there to help, or always there to help people, and that is what their aim is. And if you don't involve people in that governance structure, then the question starts to exist of what is the point. So lived experience on charity boards, I do feel, is important, but we have a range of panel members here who are going to explore today who they are, what their experiences on boards are, and what they think about having lived experience on board. In terms of me, I have been the chair of MAX, which is a national charity supporting children born without eyes. And I was born with that condition. I was a trustee there for over 7 years and involved as a volunteer for over 14. So I knew what it was to bring lived experience, and that is the viewpoint that I am bringing today. Our participants that we have with us, I'll ask them to introduce themselves, but we have Rachel Brown, Kerry Freya Jolliffe, Jamil Little, and Connor Warren. So I'm going to pass over to them just in a minute, and I'll ask them to introduce themselves, what your trustee experience is, and what the biggest message across that you want today is. So, Kerry, I'll come to you first if you don't mind.
Hiya, so yes, my name's Kiri. I have a short amount of experience of being on a board and being a trustee, and I'll sort of delve into that a little bit later to explain why. My biggest message, I guess, today is that having lived experience on a board brings a unique perspective and a deep understanding of the challenges and realities faced by the community or organisation that you're serving. So it does add a personal touch to decision making and ensures that the board is grounded in the real experience of the people that it aims to support. So that's me.
Thank you, Kerry. Jamil, we'll come to you next if you don't mind.
Yeah, hi, my name's Jamal. I have been a trustee since May 2021. My lived experience comes from being homeless and alcohol abuse as well. And what we do at Signpost is we provide support and accommodation for people who are homeless. I'm also on the board at Sight Concern, who provide support for people visually impaired and blind. And my message today would be to more for people with lived experience coming on a board with not much knowledge or background in most of the things that you're going to come across, is to remember what you're on the board for is for your lived experience. So not to worry too much about all the other things like HR, finance, and so on, and just to be confident in what you're bringing to the table, and always know that you're there for a reason and know your worth on the board as well.
Thank you. Connor, can we come to you next?
Hi, I'm Connor. I'm 17 and I'm a trustee for a mental health charity working with young people. And I've been a trustee now for about 1.5 years. And I guess my message is to get your key beneficiaries involved in the charity, because no matter their age, no matter their gender, sexuality, race, it's incredibly important to get the people that you are helping involved in the charity, because they're the ones that know it the best.
Excellent, thank you. And Rachel, we'll come to you finally.
Hi, I'm Rachel. I just on the tail end of completing a shadowy scheme with Smallwood Trust that works with gendered poverty. I had no idea that I would ever, like, being on a board was never something that I looked at, because I didn't think it was possible. So it's I think it's quite important to know that that on these boards there are people with lived experience. So the help comes from a place of caring. So because a lot of people feel like they've been forgotten about and nobody knows about them. So I think having somebody on boards that knows what these people are going through, and so it's coming from more of a place of tokenism, it's a place of caring, really helps, and it makes a difference. And in this 1 year I've learned so much, and it's really kind of made me feel more confident to go out there and help. And yeah, it's been an amazing experience, and I think things like that help as well.
Great, thank you very much. So that is our panel today. So we're going to dive straight into some questions that I've asked the panel to prepare in advance. But I'm really hoping that we will get to a stage where we can open up some Q&A for the audience as well. So we'll also look at this. the definition of lived experience that we're given today is lived experience is the experience or experiences of people on whom a social issue or combination of issues has had a direct personal impact. Lived expertise is knowledge, insights, understanding, and wisdom gathered through lived experience. So I just want to go to the panel and say, do we think that itself is quite a detailed and sometimes quite technical definition of lived experience? Do we agree with that, or is there anything that we'd want to add? So, Rachel, I'll come to you first.
I think when it comes to lived experience, defining it is quite difficult. I think it's better left open-ended, so it's what it means to you, because it's hard once you define things, people might not think it's applicable to them, but I think it's something for me. I feel that yes, it is, if it's affected you somehow, but also it's like, just if you have that real empathy and it's something that you looked into and you've kind of willing to have lived that experience, it's also, if that makes sense. It sounds a bit too philosophical, but I do think, and so in terms of like, you may never have been actually homeless, but you feel the plight of homeless people so much that you want to make a difference. You kind of take on that lived experience, as it were. So I think once you box people in with a definition, people might think, oh, well, that doesn't apply to me and I wouldn't be able to do that. Coming from another, flipping it as in to be a board member, like I thought I would never be able to be a board member, because it just means something I don't understand. Whereas now I'm more open to it because it's not such rigid definition.
Yep. No, that's great. Any of the other panel members want to come in? Connor, Kerry, Jamil, have you got any views on the sort of definition that we have around lived experience? Is there anything missing or anything that you'd want to add?
Can I just add something?
Yeah, of course.
So I think also, just because it hasn't happened to you necessarily doesn't mean you haven't suffered the consequences of it. For example, if you've got family members, whether you've got friends, whether you've got people around you, you actually can sort of deal with that as well. So just because you haven't had the lived experiences yourself doesn't mean that you still haven't been affected by it and still passionate about the subject.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think as well, I think adding on to that, it's important to realise that actually everybody's lived experience is important. So actually, something that I see quite often is parents of disabled children saying that they have the lived experience of being disabled, where actually they don't always, but what they do have is lived experience of being a parent of that disabled child, and that is equally as valuable as it is to be a disabled person, to have the lived experience of being a disabled person. But I think it's important to note that, those differences the lived experience can be different for everyone, but everyone's lived experience can be equally as valued. So yeah, I think that's something. Jamil, Kerry, is there anything that you'd want to say?
Yeah. Sorry,
sorry.
Jamil. No, you go.
No, you go first.
So I come from the criminal justice side of things, and I think when we hear the word lived experience, it's an instant, oh, okay, that person's done a bad thing. They've clearly been to prison. They've clearly hurt someone, essentially. So I think in terms of the definition that you've just said, I quite liked it. Only because it was just about the experiences, and however this may look is just going to be your opinion on that word. I did think that perhaps we could consider emphasising the continuous nature of learning and growth that comes with lived expertise. I think that this acknowledges that lived expertise, it's not exactly static, and it evolves as individuals navigate and reflect upon their experiences, however that may look.
Yeah, 100%. I really like that. Jamil, did you want to come in?
Yeah, I think that it's like what you're saying about some people are sort of living it through someone else. You yourself, if you've lived it, you have can take things on more in a practical way, rather than if you're not living it, it's sort of more theory. If that makes sense, I don't know, I'm looking at it like a practical theory sort of way. Yeah, so I think when you've lived it, it's more, I don't know, you see things more, or you can take on things more practically, hands-on sort of approach to things.
No, fantastic. I think they're all really good points. So now we've looked at, what lived experience would be, I suppose, why do we as a group feel like having lived experience on charity boards is important? And I suppose from your point of view, what do you bring that no one else on your board does bring? Jamal, I'm going to come to you first, if you don't mind.
Yes, fine. I think someone said earlier, used the word unique. Like the numbers said earlier, 59% don't have experience on their board. Bring something that, again, perspective from the service user or your beneficiaries, you can bring to the board. It's like a bridge, between the gap between the service user and the board, so that the board understands and knows what it is that essentially who they're working for. You're working for your beneficiaries. So it's great to have someone there that can tell you exactly what the service user, what they're going through, what their experience, their wants, their needs, what they appreciate, how they can help. And yeah, I just think that it just makes perfect sense, really, to have someone with that experience on the board.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think that being a bridge point is really important. I think a lot of I've certainly seen many charity boards that what they think is happening is, way up here, but actually what actually is happening is down here. So it's bridging that gap to make sure that the service provision and the strategy is actually meeting the operational needs, and I think that's really important. Kerry, did you want to come in?
Yeah, so I think lived experience on charity boards is crucial. I think it brings a level of authenticity and relevance to the decision making. I think that it ensures perspectives and needs of the individuals or the communities that the charity serves are not just considered, but are actually integrated into the decision making fabric. When people with lived experience are at the table, I think it helps in crafting more empathetic and potentially effective strategies, as they possess a more intimate understanding of the challenges involved. What I went through and why I have lived experience was something that I look back and I think, how did I even survive? So I think when I come to a board, just speaking, of my experience, is that I look at it as, okay, this is what I went through. This is the dynamics of this charity or organisation. How effective is that? Would it have worked for me? Okay, if no, what changes need to be made? Or if yes, how can we keep that going for a long-standing period?
No, I completely agree with that, and I really liked your point in there about lived experience really adding to strategy creation, because at the end of the day a board is there to overlook strategy as one of its key options, and I think strategy informed by lived experience can be really impactful compared to other strategy that isn't at the end of the day. So I really like that point. I think Rachel, Connor, do either of you want to come in? I think I'd be really keen to hear from either of you. Do you have views on what on the boards that you're on? What did you bring, and what did your lived experience bring that perhaps was missing from the board, and when you joined, and no one else could bring?
Yeah, so I didn't think, definitely for me, being a young person, being still in education, and also still having counselling myself. So actually, I sort of bring the perspective of a young person, which actually you don't necessarily see on boards. You don't see the kind of, there's all these stereotypes around the charity board, and you don't necessarily see young people coming into that. And actually, it brings a whole nother, I found it brings a whole nother sort of walk of life in, where it's a very different perspective having young people with, whether that's lived experience, if you're a youth charity or if you're any sort of charity, bringing in young people, it gives this very much different perspective on a whole range of things that you wouldn't even realize. Anything from social media to strategy to fundraising to the actual day-to-day work of the charity. And I think what I've found is it's incredibly important to have that input, because without the input of the lived experience, you sort of got no person there saying, look, this is what I feel. And, you know, if a lot of the time you've got to look at it as actually, if you're in the position of some of the beneficiaries and the people the charity supports, would you feel that the support is adequate enough, and would it help you?
Yeah, no, I think, you know, the one thing I'm getting there is really about that authenticity and making sure that there's no authenticity gap there. And I think that's really, really important. Rachel, is there anything you wanted to come in with?
Yeah, I mean, that's just agreeing with what everyone else says. It's just kind of bridging the gap of knowledge in what's missing in terms of what's needed for the beneficiaries, really. That's why it's really important. So it's not kind of just, you're actually helping sort of alleviate the problem, whereas just pushing it off to the next stop. Because that's the whole point of charity, isn't it? The ideal dream is to kind of not be needed at one point. So it's to kind of bridge that gap and make some sustainable change.
Yeah. No, I completely agree with all that. And yeah, I think, you know, each of you have got very, very individual journeys on how you got onto a board, and you know, how you bring that lived experience. So I'd just like to hear from each of you, you know, how did you get into your role as a charity trustee, and what do you think the most effective way of recruiting people like you, like us, is? How can we better reach out to people with that lived experience? And I suppose, Connor, I'll come to you first this time.
Yes. So yeah, I've been involved for 1.5 years now. Aside from being a trustee, I'm also the CEO of my own youth mental health organisation. So from my background, it was actually meeting through various different county meetings that we found out about the work of the charity, and we sort of had very similar perspectives and similar goals, and it was really that passion and actually seeing that the charity was doing something that I felt I could have done with, sort of growing up, support that I could have done with. And actually it kind of very much, as they say, the stars aligned as such, and they were looking for a trustee role. So for me, it was kind of actually building up that relationship with that charity and then being offered a trustee role.
Interesting. Cool. And I mean, do you have any views about how we can best recruit? Is it best to recruit internally and look at people that you're supporting, or?
I think it's a real mixture, actually. I think it's so important to look for people that have been affected by the charity. So whether that is parents of the young people that you support, whether that is like, you know, if you're again using the youth mental health, whether that's doctors and GPs, but also actually it's important to look at the community. So going to community networking events, going and finding other organizations, and just really sort of working with lots of different people to find the best way and find the best people.
Yeah, no, totally. Kerry, does any of that resonate with you, or have you got a different view, or how did you get into it? Tell us your story.
So my story is slightly different. I literally saw an advert on LinkedIn and did their application form. And upon reflection, that application form was a lot. It was about 6 pages. It was many questions, not necessarily about me either. It was questions that I think really reflected the charity, which, you know, at the time, I didn't see a problem with that. However, looking back, they were not interested in me whatsoever. It was more about, this is what we need as a charity, come and do what we need. I didn't jump onto a board in terms of from my lived experience point of view either. I felt like it was something that I needed to do to enhance my employability and to kind of bring me up a notch, if you like. So I do, and I did regret being on that board. I didn't feel like I fit in. I kind of put on a bit of a facade. In all honesty, I didn't know what I was talking about. So I wasn't as effective as I could have been. So not only did I let myself down, arguably I let the board down as well. But when I did the application, I went to one of their offices and met the chair and had a bit of an informal interview. So it was quite a process, because then after that, I had to join on a meeting and shadow it for the 2.5 hours and then get knocked off for them to vote to be brought back in. So it's not actually as simple as you would like to think. It was for me worse than applying for a job. I didn't continue for a long time with this particular organisation. I literally just didn't fit in. However, I've gained some experience through the Criminal Justice Alliance on their Elevate programme. And this has given me an absolutely fantastic insight into how boards are ran, especially for the sector that I'm extremely interested in. In terms of recruiting, just only because I have that one experience of an intensive recruitment process, I would say that upon advertisement, it needs to have defined roles and expectations, because it's all well and good being on a board, but if you've got, 7 people that are from a HR perspective, we're not doing what we should be doing here. And I think in terms of advertising, the use of online platforms is extremely powerful. That's exactly how I've found everything that I'm currently doing now in the sector.
Excellent. No, that's and I actually really like your point about, it's also about how you recruit. It's not just where you advertise. I think that's something you're seeing more and more in job advertising. Looking at different ways to actually have that trustee application, and can we get away from that old interview, CV, covering letter? I think that's actually more prominent now in trustee recruitment than it is in mainstream recruitment for paid roles. So actually, I really think that's an interesting point, that, can we look at different recruitment avenues? Maybe look at, let's look at a video application or something like that, which I think is really, really useful. Jamal, did you want to come in?
Yeah, I was a beneficiary of Signpost, the homeless charity, for almost 3 years. Once I no longer needed the service, I got my own accommodation. I was approached by one of the managers there. They told me that the board was looking to diversify. They would like someone with lived experience. I had no idea didn't know what trustee meant or anything like that. I did a bit of research, found out what it means, and thought, yeah, that's something that I can do. Also, it was a way for me to give back. Essentially, they kind of saved my life, to be honest. And I just thought, you take all your life. I thought that this was a good opportunity for me to give back. And yeah, that's pretty much how I got onto the board.
That's good. And in terms of when you were going through that, what is a trustee process? How well do you feel you were supported to understand the legal implementations, What word am I looking for? The legal responsibilities that came along with being a trustee? Did you feel that was communicated well to you, or do you feel, that's an area that we should perhaps be concentrating on more to simplify the language around and make it easier to understand?
Yeah, I supported well with it. I've done training. They helped me with training. Could it be simplified? Yeah, I think it could, because it is. It's a lot. It can be overwhelming. Not coming from having background in any of it. But I feel that I've been supported sufficiently by. So yeah.
Cool. No, that's really good. Rachel, we'll come to you. Have you got any inputs?
Yeah, I mean, obviously I'm different because I'm not an actual board member, but I'm doing this shadowy program. So I had applied for a grant from Smallwood, And then I got an email that if I was interested in doing this program. So it's been a year of attending board meetings, and how it's helped in terms of the difference is, like, once a month we get together. If there's anything we don't understand on the board papers, they explain it to us. A fund has been provided for personal development any way it can go. We've got access to any of the board members to kind of ask them sort of questions and things. So it's been extremely helpful because as everyone's saying, I had no idea, and I would never have thought of applying for an actual board position. I just thought it wasn't available to me, it wasn't an option. Whereas now I have the confidence, I know what's going on, and everything has been explained to me individually, which is something that I've got to understand, and I've taken part in things that I didn't know could have happened. Had a like sort of applying to the lottery fund and things like that. So it's coming at it from all angles, and it's definitely been a learning program. So it wasn't just, okay, here, throw you in at the deep end. It's literally it's a program that's allowed me to understand what's happening, and but it's not just one way. So they've asked for our advice on things, and we've met with different people at different times, and they have taken our suggestions and inputs in, which is also really, really it's nice. You feel like you're heard.
Okay. Well, that's interesting. I mean, I think what I've certainly taken away from that is, one, we should look at, the charity should look at the pool of people that they support for the lived experience trustees. But I suppose too that it's good to have that direct connection in with the charity during the recruitment process. I think, you know, I've certainly been approached by more than one recruiter looking for trustees or a chair, and I think having that conversation with them can be very cold because they don't understand the charity, so to speak. They're just there to do a job. But I think what I've got from that is actually having that interaction with charities themselves during the recruitment process can really help. So I think that's been some really useful insights there. In terms of lived experience on boards, it can often be a tick box exercise. I remember when I was a young trustee with a charity, I was 19 years old at the time, and I was told that I was on the board because I was young. There was nothing about my interaction with young people, nothing about my understanding of social media, nothing about my understanding of strategy or my uni work, any of that. It was all, I was there because I was young, and because of that, I didn't have a voice. And I think I'm keen to explore how can we ensure that having lived experience on a board goes beyond that tick box exercise, and at the same time, how do we create accountability for those roles and make sure that they are seen as important as an accountancy skill set, an HR skill set, or a marketing skill set? How can we make sure the accountability is there to go, look, lived experience is as important as these other areas? Kerry, I'll come to you first.
So I think in terms of, you know, creating accountability, I think that if it would be helpful to explicitly state the value and clearly articulate the importance of lived experience in terms of the organisation's missions and values. Without this, you could question, you know, well, what is the organisation actually doing if they can't have people trickling from the very top all the way down in their organisation with lived experience. And I think that doing this, it expresses and it enriches the decision making for the organisation and its overall effectiveness. So I just think from my point, if I was to see what that charity is doing or that organisation is doing and how effective it actually is and the help that, you know, young people or adults are receiving, that for me would really highlight that we've got some powerful individuals in good positions that are assisting with this. In terms of, you know, how could we actually see if it's tick box or not? I think we could potentially evaluate and recognise contributions by looking into developing maybe an evaluation criteria and measure the contributions that are made by individuals with lived experience. I don't know how this would look, I don't know how you do it, but I always think that it's always good to have a look back and then take accountability for when things are not going right and when things are going right. And that is exactly how I think you could look at whether it's tick box or not.
No, I really like that, and I really enjoy that framework thing. I'm not sure what that would look like. Penny, that's one for you to take away. But yeah, I think having one of these, having something that you can measure would be useful, I think. Rachel, did you want to come in? Oh, you're on mute if
I
you're speaking. Oh,
don't
there we
think
go.
I've got quite a lot to add. I think it's the whole point of lived experience. It's harder to kind of gauge. You just have to kind of sort of take a person's word for it, because it's your lived experience. And as I said before, it looks different for everybody. So I think if you start putting measurements on it, it kind of like it's harder to quantify. I think it depends on what the charity is as well.
Yeah, that's useful. Connor, do you want to come in, or is there anything that you'd want to add? How does this topic come in tick box, and how do you recognise it as an equity skill alongside those other areas?
I think, as it said, it definitely depends on the charity, but also definitely depends on the individual. I think charity boards can often be quite daunting, sort of going into the board meetings, especially if you're just starting out, can be quite a daunting position where, you know, if you could feel almost sort of go quite quiet and not necessarily feel you're able to share your views or feel that your input would be listened to. And I think actually it's important to recognize your relationship within the board and to recognize when you feel that you are being listened to and when you feel like you're not being listened to. And I think that's important to know when you're going into sort of the recruitment side. If you're given the opportunity to go and shadow in a meeting, I think it's also important to look at the dynamics of a board and see whether you feel like you fit in there and whether you feel you'll be listened to there.
Yeah.
Because like most boards, you'll always get the bigger characters.
Yeah.
And you'll get the more timid characters. And it's important to actually realize yourself, I think, as well, and kind of realize where you can spend your time and where your input can be used. I think I'm trying to get a point there. I don't know if it's what.
No, I think it's a really clear point. I'll come to Jamal before I come back and see what I sort of summarise. But yeah, Jamal, do you want to say anything?
Yeah, I think it's about just getting the individual as involved as much as possible. Ask them questions. Anything that's, especially if it's anything to do with the client or the beneficiary, client base, beneficiary base, ask them, you know, what do you think? What was it like for you, if you don't mind sharing? Just get them as involved as possible, really, in the conversations and in the decision making. You know, the board sort of knows what they've been through or their experience. Then ask them questions and just be open and honest.
Yeah. I mean, I think what I'm getting from this is actually I think a lot of this can be a make or break from how things are chaired. So actually, if your chair can create the environment where space is being created for your voice to come forward, and actually, if putting those board papers out, if the chair actually includes an agenda item on what you're there to do alongside the accounts, alongside the marketing strategy, alongside the HR updates, it's creating that space where actually you can come forward and present your information as the expert. So for me personally, I do feel like a lot of this falls down to the effectiveness of the chair in actually creating that culture and creating that environment that allows you to succeed, but also allows you to be recognised in the area that you're there to do. So I suppose that's my message out to all the chairs out there. I'll say this as I'm no longer a chair. I think what with the boards that you've all been on, it'd be interesting to know about what had to change about the board that you are or you were on in order to include someone lived experience. Was there anything that was missing when you joined? Was it what had to change? Did you have to advocate for any changes yourself? Just to get an idea of actually how hard is it and what needs to change, if anything. Jamal, did you want to come forward at all?
Yeah, there wasn't really much change that had to be made. I think probably an induction program. I think we recently have put together a solid induction program. I guess for me it was the training that was needed for me. So it was, the option was always there, but once the induction program sort of was rolled out, then it was much easier for me to start doing sort of stuff.
No,
So
that's good. I think having a good induction program really is important. Kerry, anything from you?
Yeah, so obviously my experience, with being on a board was not exactly representative of my lived experience. My lived experience is with the criminal justice system, and I went to a completely different board. So I know I didn't make the right decision in terms of my experience and being appointed, and I did just jump in with 2 feet. However, if the board would have actually advertised their needs from the trustee, then it would have actually given me more information at the beginning and I might not have actually applied. The biggest thing for me on a board is just the welcoming environment, fostering a culture of inclusivity and openness where all board members, regardless of their background, feel comfortable sharing their perspectives. I think it was mentioned, you could talk about your experience on the board, you can be asked direct questions. And if I'm completely honest, if I'm on a board as a trustee, I am your equal. So if I'm having to consistently talk about my lived experience, I actually might get a bit mortified and actually withdraw from conversations. And the only reason that I say this is because I'm way more than what happened to me. I'm now an academic, I'm studying my master's, I work, I'm in a managerial position now. I should be respected for what my point is, as opposed to having to explain why my point is that. Especially if I was on a board for those, we're advocating or assisting those that are involved in the CJS. I wouldn't think that it would be powerful for me to sit there and go, wow, 3 years ago I was in prison. It doesn't matter. I'm not the client. I'm not the the client group, the person that we're talking about. I'm a decision maker. So I would want to listen to the individuals utilizing that service. As much and as powerful as it is to have lived experience, that's my experience, not my expertise.
No, I think that's really, that's my experience, not my expertise. I think that's really powerful. I think it's something that I see a lot with disabled people, in that, you can't talk on behalf of a whole group. You can just give what your understanding is. So, I think that's really useful. Connor, anything you'd like to add?
So I was incredibly lucky that I joined as a trustee just as the organisation was going from a CIC to a charity. So actually I was one of the first trustees. And for me, it was very much being taken as an equal, as Kiri said, being seen as an equal rather than being seen as a young person or being seen as somebody, that's gone through counselling themselves. It was creating an environment where I could easily sit and make the decisions. It'd be quite overwhelming with all these numbers and all these. I don't come from a finance background. I don't come from any sort of background like that. So it can be quite a daunting thing, sat there trying to read the accounts and that kind of thing. But being there and saying, look, these are my strengths, these are my weaknesses, and learning. I think I didn't necessarily have an induction training. I haven't had training, but I've had experience. I have now learnt in the role. I knew at the beginning that I cannot read a balance sheet for the life of me. Last week I actually wrote a balance sheet myself. So in the role, I have learnt so many things. And I think it's important actually to understand that and to recognise that across the board is that nobody there is perfect. Nobody there knows absolutely everything about every subject. It's about sort of helping each other.
No, completely.
Kind of looking at it that way.
I think that's really important. I think it's also important to realise that, it is fine for people with with lived experience to get things out of being a trustee as well. It's not all about, it doesn't have to always be about giving your all to the charity. There can be that two-way street sometimes. So that's a perfect example of, you learning balance sheet and finance stuff. Rachel, anything from you before I go to our final plan question?
Again, I'm in a different sort of perspective, because I'm in a program to learn about boards. So a lot of what I'm doing, the program, there's 4 other girls as well, and we're being taught what goes on in boards, and we're being explained how it all works. So we bring in the lived experience, but then we're also gaining experience as well. So that's a whole different thing. Like, I think when they have these programs, it helps, because now I'm not just the lived experience, I've also got the board experience as well.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. I think I think there's two big things there for me. Is it's all about the induction program, making sure you give the right information, but it's also about working out, how can that be a two-way street with your trustees, and especially with lived experience trustees, how can they help? How can they use their trustee role to help them outside of the charity? I think that's a really good input as well. Final question, plan question, and if we can try and keep this sort of relatively, so I'm not going to come to each in turn. I'm just going to put the question out there, and if any of you have anything you'd like to come in, please feel free to do so. But can there ever be too much lived experience on a charity board? So I'm just going to throw that out there, and if any of you would like to come in, please shout out your names, and we will come to you.
It's Kiri.
Hi, Kiri.
And I think yes and no, because whilst lived experience is incredibly valuable on a board, it's possible to encounter challenges if there's an imbalance or if other essential skills are overlooked. So on boards, we need a diversity of skills and balanced perspectives. And if we have too much of a single perspective, including lived experience, it can potentially limit the range of perspectives and ideas on the board. So I'm kind of like on the fence.
Excellent. Fantastic. Thank you for that, Kiri. Any of the other three?
Rachel here. Yeah.
Hi, Rachel.
I think it depends on what the charity is. If it's for example, like with me, I'm on a board for gendered poverty. I don't think there's too much as lived experience on that kind of board, because if you've got a bunch of like rich men sitting on a board, they're not really going to fully understand. So again, it just depends on what board like what the charity represents, and I think that's what needs to be taken into account. Other than that, yeah, it's a touchy one, I think.
Cool. I think, and the reason I asked this is because, I was a participant in this session last year, and I think it was me that raised the point that actually sometimes there can be too much lived experience. I think it is striking that balance of, making sure that your board composition is right for your charity. And I think that's a really important thing, and that lived experience is there. But it is important to look at the skill set as a whole. And I think we've got that point across quite well. So Penny, that's the last of our planned questions. I just want to come to you to see if there's any from the chat that we'd like to put forward before we wrap up.
There are probably more than we can possibly get to, I'm afraid, folks. The chat's been very active. So let's go with Gemma's. Gemma says, how do you all, and I guess this depends what your lived experience is, but how do you all balance the demands of a trustee role with the need to earn money and pay the bills? I've observed that being a barrier for people, and I'm wondering how to support people with lived experience to overcome that challenge.
Yep. Any other panel want to come in on that one?
Can I come in on that one? Again, I've been quite fortunate in the program that I am. So we do get paid for our lived experience, but obviously this is what do you call it? It's a 1-year program. It's not an ongoing thing. But I guess the main thing is that I've now got the experience, whereas before I would never have gone forward for this. But as Jeremiah said, it's it's giving something, being able to give back. Now I know I can do it from that angle, so it's helped. This being paid for it now, I'm happy to do it otherwise.
And can I add in as well?
Yeah,
I think it's also not just about the money aspect, it's about the time aspect. So it's about being accommodating with the whole board. So, you know, as I said, I'm a student, I'm also the CEO of mental health charity. So I'm quite a busy person, but it's about finding ways that you can accommodate the boards, whether that's having meetings in evenings. That's what we do. We have board meetings in the evenings after everybody's finished work. That way people can still work their full-time jobs and they're not missing out on work to attend the meetings.
Yeah, no, I think I think they're two really good points. I think as well, I think the whole debate about whether or not you should pay trustees, that's a whole separate session, I think. But I think at the very bare minimum, at least make sure that you at least make that the trustees aren't out of pocket. So encourage all trustees to reclaim the expenses that they actually incur in their role. I think if you can actively encourage people to do that, I think that's brilliant. And I think, yeah, be respectful of people's time is the most important thing, and don't have board meetings that are for 6 hours on a Saturday, for example. I think they're the two really most important things.
Thank you. And I see that Gemma, who asked the question, has got her hand up. Gemma, did you want to come in and say something?
Just to say thank you so much for all those responses and for the session in general. It's been excellent. Thank you, Robbie, for chairing it, and to all of you for your insights. I guess I'm particularly thinking about really recent service users, or I know not everyone likes that term, people who've used the services of the charity recently, and the challenges then of transitioning, because that's what I've got most experience in supporting. And I know it's so difficult for people because often you need to then go and get a job because my experiences with a mental health charity and also more recently at Migrant Help with survivors of trafficking and modern slavery, how do we support people who may need to go and get a job to live to then also be trustees? It's such a challenge. But yeah, really useful. I didn't know if you had anything further to add on that part of the question, but what you said was really useful. Thank you.
I think the other thing for me would be to be really clear on the expectations. I think often with trustees, we can set out, you will do everything. But actually, if you can be clear on those asks and make it clear what you're asking for the input on, I think that really helps prioritise. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Robbie.
There's a question here from Hannah. How do you manage sensitive topics when working with those with lived experience? Subject matter can sometimes be very tough and potentially triggering. How best to manage this when having to talk about difficult topics in your board meetings?
Anyone want to come in?
I think the way I see things, if the charity represents something, I think people should be sensitive to those topics. You shouldn't feel pressure, but if you should be comfortable enough to be able to express it, because if this is something that's represented by the charity, then I think people should be comfortable enough to kind of deal with the subject matter. It shouldn't be something that makes people feel awkward, and you should be like with where I am doing my program, you're not forced to talk about it, and they tell you if you don't have to, if you don't want to, but they are very, very understanding. And when you don't feel judged and you're comfortable enough, which is kind of good because it helps with the beneficiaries as well. They shouldn't be looked at as, oh, poor you type thing. It should be all comfortable just to be able to speak on something, because once the shame is away from the beneficiaries, again, that helps them feel better and not so ashamed. And yeah.
No, I think that's a really good thing. I think the only thing I would say is please feel free to use trigger warnings. So I think if you can give people the heads up of what the subjects might be and give them the option to opt out if possible, I think that's also a good tip.
Can I just jump in really quickly about this question? So I think the first thing is we could go back to the recruitment part of things and ensure that those who are applying or at least interested in such a position are aware that there could be potential triggers, so that it gives them the autonomy to actually understand, okay, am I in a position where I can be at such a level making such impactful decisions? Am I ready for that myself? Because when you are on a board, you're giving, you can't can't be thinking about yourself necessarily. And then I think when board papers are given out, immediately, like you said, Robbie, there's a trigger warning to make people aware that, okay, this meeting we're going to be discussing A, B, and C. And then if it's an online meeting, for example, you can pop out at certain times just in case it does become too much. And to be fair, like Rachel said, we are in a position where you have to be able to be in a certain point where you're confident to talk about such things. And we just need to remember that as people with lived experience, when we are on a board, we are there to help and assist make decisions that are powerful for those, you know, utilising the service. So it doesn't mean that I have to sit there and answer a question specifically about me. I could manage my trigger by saying, well, you know, A, B, and C, rather than speaking definitively about what I went through.
Yeah, no, completely agree with them. I think the only final point I'd make for hand back to Penny is aftercare is important. I think often charities think about the welfare, rightly think about the welfare of their employees, but if there is stuff coming up, then I think it is incumbent on the chair to make sure that they keep in regular contact with their trustees, and if they do need support, then make sure the charity provides it, whether that's professional support, counselling, a counselling service. Make sure that that support is in place for your trustees and your volunteers, as well as for your staff.
Thank you so much, Robbie. Thank you, Robbie, Rachel, Connor, Kiri, and Jamal. That was just absolutely fascinating and educational. Thank you so much. And Gemma has said, can we do more? We need much longer. We need a whole day on this. We need weeks on this. Yes, please. So thank you all so much for coming. Sorry, my colleague Fiona, if you could please post the outro chat, which I was so listening to this that I've completely failed to post the evaluation form in the chat, and I failed to tell you that we still have another day at the festival and tomorrow. But hopefully Fiona will find the link in a sec. We've got a networking session tonight, as I mentioned, 7:30 p.m. We'll find the link for that in a sec. Please do come along if you want to talk about these issues and others that have come up during the festival. Please do tell us what you thought of this session. I'll just tell you some of the other events we've got going on over the next 2 days. So we've got Should Trustee Boards Have Diversity Quotas, 5 till 6 p.m. tonight. We've got Frontline Volunteer to Trustee, which is 6:30 to 7:30 tonight. So that's people who started as a volunteer and went on to become a trustee. Where are all the working class trustees? That's tomorrow night at 5 p.m. Now, if you'd like to convert to a weekly pass, if you've paid £5 to come to this event and you're thinking, well, you know, that was cracking, I want more of that, you can find a coupon in your confirmation email, which will give you £5 off a weekly pass, which will give you access to the rest of the week's events, plus the recordings of the ones that have passed. So I can see Fiona hasn't found the link. Sorry, I landed it on you, Fiona. So don't go anywhere. Give me literally 4 seconds. And there we go. There are all the links I should have posted 5 minutes ago. Apologies. So that's the link to the evaluation form, the rest of the week, and the networking session. So thank you all so much for coming, and thank you, Robbie and panelists, for an absolutely fantastic session.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thanks.